Just want to grab your attention for 2 seconds. We are running our first ever live fat loss masterclass this coming Monday, the 22nd of April at 7:30. That's BST, British Summer Time. So London, if you're not sure what that is. And essentially what we're going to be going through is my 5 blueprint tips, and I would say like the fundamentals to getting absolutely solid fat loss. So if you are somebody who's struggled with fat loss, are struggling with fat loss, has no idea where to start, or is a little bit tentative and doesn't get great results, but you're kind of chipping along a bit, but really want to kickstart it, this is 100% what you need to be attending. Buttons in the link in the bio there. Any questions, let me know. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the JLX podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. I've had a slightly different change of scenery. I've just been hammering my work away in my office this last few days, and you know what? I started setting up this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll understand. If you're not, even so, I started setting up everything in my office, and I thought, you know what? I found something different, and I went to go outside because it's been so nice here, and I freaking love the sun, and it's just got cloudy, so I thought, nah, I'll sit here. So I'm sat on my sofa, enjoying the sun from the inside of the room. Anyway, look, I hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing good. Let's dive in. So today so last week I said I don't normally do prefabricated questions because I think about them too much and then I get in my own head. Now, interestingly, you probably have realized this, I have to give a lot of backstory to things. So when I say things that are potentially antagonistic, I feel the need to justify myself with like 5 minutes of dialogue. And you've probably realized this, and equally, maybe you're someone who does this yourself. So I'm not the best person when it comes to saying punchy things, because I think, for example, I could give my opinion on something like I did on Instagram yesterday, to do with Hyrox, and I feel like I need to justify that opinion so much, but actually it is just an opinion. And this is something I think people really are unable to separate themselves from. Somebody's opinion is not a fact. If you are offended by somebody's opinion, there's a lot of nuance to this, but in a sense, it's difficult to be offended by someone's opinion because it's their thought process. Now, I'm not saying if they've directly insulted you or they have insulted a group of people or anything like that. It's very, very different. But I'm saying, for example, one thing I think people are really lacking the ability to do at the moment is, let's take an easy example. I've had loads of conversations in the past with people where they've been like, bodybuilding is just fucking stupid. It's a ridiculous sport. And although I am not competitive in bodybuilding, I have done a lot of bodybuilding, right? That is just their opinion. So I actually have no right to be upset about their opinion because that's their view on the situation. It would be a bit like me looking at a painting going, oh, that's a really nice shade of green, and then being like, that's red. Like, that's the way they see it. That's the way they see it. But I feel like a lot of people take things very personally. I take things very personally, to be fair, but I really try hard to separate myself from other people's opinions to what is a fact. So if somebody says to me something that's far more antagonistic in the way that they're being, it's really hard to separate opinion. But generally speaking, I think a skill that we all could develop better is the ability to be like, okay, that's how you think about it. Like, that's how you think about it. But instead, we feel the need to argue about things that maybe we don't actually need to argue about because it's someone's opinion. Don't get me wrong, if I'd written on my story, I think everyone who does X is blah, 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 then I've just insulted a whole group of people. That's very different. But I do think that people take things very to heart, which has almost nothing to do with them, which is weird. I don't know if you've seen this personally at the moment in like friendship groups and things like that. I'm not sure really where it's come from, but it's just an interesting thing. And like, for example, and I will go into this actually. So yesterday I put on someone asked me on my Q&A on Instagram, what thoughts that I have on Hyrox, for example. Now, I actually answered this in twofold. I said, I've got two sets of thought processes here. My first thought process as a coach is that it's fantastic. It's accessible. Loads of people seem to be enjoying it. Loads of people are doing it. And to add more to that, I would say that it seems to be an environment where fitness is challenging the body, what it can do, not the body, what it can look like. And I love that. It is an athletic pursuit where people are getting fitter, stronger, and healthier as a result. There is literally zero negatives to that, and it's fucking wonderful. I love it for that reason. I did, however, say in my second point that I thought from an athlete's perspective, so like the athlete in me is saying, so actually, no, let me just caveat this. The first thing I actually said was I thought that Hyrox is an easier version of CrossFit, like paddle is an easier version of tennis. Now, you could argue that with me, but it's actually fact. And I would really struggle to find any other fact to that other than it is true, right? For example, the technical elements of CrossFit are really fucking hard. I've done CrossFit, and of all the people that I know, I've never competed in it, by the way, but I could pick up the movements quite quickly. So I can walk on my hands quite well. So I think the longest handstand walk I ever did was about 25 meters. I can do obstacles in handstand, so I can walk up a set of plates and walk down the other side. I can do 12 back-to-back muscle ups that are not kipping, like fairly strict. Like I can pick up the movements pretty well. So I feel like I'm in a position where I can give a pretty good answer of this. I'm also someone who's managed to snatch 100 kilos and I can clean and jerk 145. So I know how to weightlift. I know how to do the gymnastics. I'm not like a bench person here who's kind of going, I can't do any of these things, but I'm going to have an input anyway. So the skill level required to do CrossFit is one of the things that makes it so difficult and less accessible. And that's where Hyrox has come in and said, actually, if we remove the skill element of a lot of things and we make this more about the fitness, we're going to include a lot more people. And I love that. I think it's great. But that doesn't mean that it's not an easier version of CrossFit, right? Just in the way that it's kind of formulated. So I'm not trying to offend people with this. It is my opinion and it's what I think. And actually, I would go so far as saying it was fact. I think that is a fact. I think if you took the world champion CrossFit athletes and you put them up against Hyrox in both events, the CrossFit athletes would likely win both. So when if you did that, same with tennis. If you took the best tennis players in the world and put them against the best paddle players, the tennis players would probably win. So my point is this: the elements of it, which I've already said, I think are fantastic. And like I said, the athlete in me, and that was like the third point I made, was simply that we're making things a lot easier these days. So sports are becoming much easier, which is great from the perspective of accessibility, which obviously the human and the coach in me loves. I think it's fucking wonderful. The athlete in me says, why are we making so many things easier? Why are we not just why are we not embracing the suck? Why are we not providing ourselves with a challenge that means we have to get better at it? And there's so many different thought fields on that. You could be someone who says, well, hang on a minute, the thought of doing CrossFit, I'm never going to be able to do those things, so why bother? And that's fair enough. Do you know what? Yeah, I can see why you would not do CrossFit because it's very challenging. Equally, I coached a lady last year. I won't name her, but I will call her Jay. She is a mother of 3, high-flying job, and she actually, she joined the team. I think she was part of the team for not a very long period of time, actually, super short period of time compared to most of our clients. But she said she worked at home all day. She really wanted to move her body more. Her friends had joined CrossFit and she wanted to do it. Tell you what, I still follow her now, still talk to her every now and again. And she's learned to weightlift. She's doing all the running, she's doing all the rowing. She's doing all the skilled movements. So there's a part of me that then says, if somebody with that much time commitment, and in terms of being a mother of 3, very high flying job, therefore low time commitment in terms of what she's able to do, she has to make time and things like that. If she can go and learn all these things, then maybe there is hope for everyone else. Everyone's 24 hours are very different, of course, but I think that's a very impressive example. So yeah, coming back full circle on what I started this podcast on, I would say that, I think what I have produced are just my opinions on this. And we are not all going to agree on other people's opinions on stuff, because that's what makes us humans. We have different experiences which enable us to have different views on things. If we all had the same experiences and therefore we all had the same views, humanity would be fucking dangerous, because there wouldn't be people in the world to keep the other people in check. If we all thought it was a great idea to melt the ice caps because having less ice in the world would make it warmer, let's say, that's obviously completely stupid, but let's say, for example, everybody thought, yeah, well, everyone likes a bit of a warmer world, that'd be great. You know, obviously that's stupid. There'd be no one to keep people in check. So it's really important we all have different views. And I say this to all of my clients, and I also said this on multiple different so I've done quite a few speaking engagements, whether that's to businesses, whether that's to professional outfits in terms of sports and athletes. I've also done it to some youth athletes. So I coached recently 2 groups of young netball athletes in nutrition. And I said this to everyone. It is so important that we don't agree, but what's more important is that we are respectful in that disagreement. So we don't have to agree, that's great. I love the fact that we don't agree, let's have a great conversation, but we do have to be respectful of one another, because that's the only way that we can understand. And that's where my second point to this comes in, is it's so important listening to understand, not listening to reply. You can always tell when somebody's listening to reply, because as soon as they think they want to respond, bam, have this. The best listeners are people who will let you get your point fully out, then will come back to you with a point that's so much more, I think, so much more congruent to the whole argument. But also, arguments often start because people make statements, they don't ask questions. So in a lot of arguments people have, they'll make statements, you said this, blah, 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 bam, 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 bam. That is where statements create arguments. The better way of going about that would have been to say, hey, could you just explain this a little bit to me? I feel like I may have got the wrong end of the stick, but I may not have. So if you could just explain this to me a bit better, I'd really appreciate it. Boom. What you've done is you've opened up the floor for them to explain themselves. You've not attacked them. You've just asked the question. I realise I've gone on a bit of a tangent here from where I originally went with this podcast, but a little bit of an interesting sociology entrance, which I don't mind. Hey, we're here, we're listening to different things. Like, it's the whole point of being a podcast. While we're here, we're also going to talk about Zoe. I promised I would do this a few weeks ago, but the truth is, every time I've come to do it, I've kind of thought differently on how I would approach this, because I don't want to whip out a bunch of scientific papers, because that could take me hours, not only to do that, but then to make my point. Because originally I had a very clear reason for why I disliked it, okay? And then I thought, right, I need to back this up with science to make sure that it's congruent with us as a business, me as an individual, and also I'm not just making rogue claims, because nobody likes rogue claims. But then I thought, actually, if I just go with the original point, that is actually enough. That's enough. So I'm going to go with my original point. Here are the 2 reasons, I mean, there's many, but here are the 2 reasons, my opinion, I do not like Zoe as a format for both health and for fat loss. Health, for many people, and let's just dial this in actually, many people being women, right? So the majority of people who are listening to this are probably women. So the majority of you guys listening to this, for you, if I asked you what your honest definition of health was, I think many of you would associate that with weight loss. Because if you look at most magazines, they are health-based magazines and they're always talking about fat loss. So for many individuals, health means lose weight. But that only is true if you are in an unhealthy range for your body weight, or you are very sedentary. And you could be in a healthy range for your body weight, but you could be very sedentary, which would still be unhealthy, right? We need to be active and at a good body weight to ensure good health. There are many other factors which we're not going to go into today. Why then do we look at, say, let's stick with Zoe actually, I was going to give you a different example. With Zoe, for example, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's really good for your health. It's good for your health in the sense that, you know, this is people like who are advertising it, by the way. So I've seen some influencers and people like that say, that's really good for your health, eating better foods, things like that. Now, the thing for me in all of this is that if you need an app to read these numbers to tell you what to eat, something really bad has gone along here, because where is the first 20 years of your life where, let's say if I took 99% of the population, they'd all be able to tell me roughly what was a healthy meal. We need a bit of this, we need a bit of that, we need a bit of that, and we can have a bit of this as well, right? I don't think I am outspoken in suggesting that that's a privilege in the Western world. I think in the Western world, 99% of people could tell you what a healthy plate of food looked like, especially if you're listening to this, right? I'm not going to go down the road of caveating. My brain is saying, keep adding caveats, but I'm not going to do it. Good job I warned you about that, wasn't it? So when it comes to things like Zoe and they're saying, oh, you know, it's really good for your health and things like that, we already know what's good for our health. And I think the issue here isn't that we need an app to tell us that. It's actually having the accountability, which potentially is being given to you by the app. However, I do believe that it puts the emphasis on what a machine is telling you to do, not on actually what you know and what you should be doing. What I mean by that is you become potentially dependent on that to keep getting results, to keep feeling good, to keep registering those things. The negative elements to that are echoed, to be honest. They start at one point and will keep going, because let's say, for example, you do one thing, it's not quite right. Oh my God, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. There are so many confinements to that. And I'm a big believer in evolution, right? I think most people are, based on the fact that we have, you know, crazy amounts of proof for it. And if we really needed to know certain things, our brains will have devised a way to teach us those things. So if we really needed to know what our blood sugar levels were, our brains will have divided a place for us to see that level. If you consider the fact that people with diabetes only know they have diabetes because they go through a ton of tests, and then they go through the systems that allow them to regulate that. So obviously they go through GP, they go through consultants, things like that. And then many of them are obviously medicated, depends on the type. But that is a medical condition that requires the constant and, I would say, frequent involvement from us. Because obviously if you're injecting, things like that. What you're looking at with something like Zoe is just a complete unnecessary, and this is taking me into my second point, the absolute unnecessary level of data and numbers. Now, this is actually my biggest bugbear, and I was building up to this. Having worked with so many women who struggle with disordered eating, having loved and lived with people who struggle with it, eating disorders and everything in between, typically people with disordered eating or eating disorders focus on numbers. They will focus on how many steps they've done. They will focus on the weight on the scales. They will focus on the length of cardio they've done, the number of reps they've done. I could go on. So giving people a hyper focus on numbers, personally and in my opinion, I think that could increase people's chances of disordered eating, if not eating disorders. Now, I don't think I have to go into why that's a terrible thing. And with everything, we have to look at risk-reward here. From my opinion, what people need is a longer-term solution, but a way that fixes a short-term impulse. So I spoke in my last podcast about how we like to make sure people are getting results early on, because that's fundamentally what people come for, and we want to show them what we're going to do is working, because else people lose interest. So what I feel is that too many people are looking for a quick fix that's like too good to be true. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Now, as I said earlier, I wasn't going to speak on the level of results they get. You know, I'm not going to go into whether it actually works or not and things like that. Maybe it does work. Personally, I see this as a fad, and I really do hope it's one that is short-lived in this industry and it goes far quicker than it came in. Because from my personal experience as a coach and as a human being, I do genuinely believe that the damage it could do is going to by far outweigh the good that it will do for people. I think that it's likely to create dependence, which is great as a business model for them, but it's not if you're the individual who's the dependent. I think it's very highly likely to induce some kind of disordered eating. And I also think that, you know, above all of these things, Our bodies give us a huge amount of signs and signals for what it likes and doesn't like. If we work hard enough to uncover those things, we can live our life doing the things our body loves in a way it loves doing them without needing this consistent support. I do think that blood sugar monitoring should be left to diabetics and people who really need that support. I also think that what's important to note here is that people kind of blood sugar mongering, I would call it, where people like fear mongering around that, it's not just carbohydrate that spikes blood sugar, okay? Whey protein will spike your blood sugar. A carrot will spike your blood sugar. You know, there are so many things that it's not just carbohydrate. So again, we're kind of pointing blame at things here to give us reason to do a certain thing. Oh, you know, I don't digest food, but I'm going to go and do that. Instead of actually putting in the work that would create a long-lasting and, most importantly, self-sustaining, not just sustainable, but self-sustaining, where you know what works for you, you feel good, you feel comfortable, you perform well, all those great things. As I said at the start, this is just my opinion on things. I said I would do it, but to kind of give my 2 points there, my biggest 2 concerns are the likelihood around disordered eating and the fixation on numbers. And that really is my point, to be honest. That is the biggest thing. I think that the kind of sustainability around it is important too, but my biggest concern is that, mostly because I've worked with so many people who've struggled with it. So they're just my opinions, and I will happily debate this with anyone, by the way. Like, I am an open book, so if you want to come on here and try and change my mind, by all means, I am happy to have that discussion, because maybe I could learn something. You know, maybe you're somebody who's listening to this thinking, Zoe's changed my life. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about how that's happened. I'd love to hear about your experiences, and I'd love to have that discussion. Hopefully, if you're somebody who's listened to this enough, you'll know I'm very open-minded. I change my mind on things a lot, and that's good. I like that as a quality in myself, because it means that I don't get super pigeonholed into ideas and then I can't leave them. But yeah, that's kind of my thought processes, and like I said, be happy to kind of chat them through. So folks, we're going to leave it there today. Just a couple of points on a bit of sociology at the start and a little bit of Zoe at the end there. So do let me know if you've got any questions, and all the love. We'll speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye for now.